If I stood out in the rain night, my only light a candle, a million miles away, would you lay down your fire as I raised mine? Would you not kill again? And oh, when you're near me, oh my love, oh my joy, there's nothing ever to weary me, oh my darling one. I also want to show off these roses that came in here on Valentine's Day from the husband of a certain Crystal Rollins Jackson, our amazing publications and office manager. And it was a reason that I wanted to tell you about the new way of saying "Be My Valentine." It's "Free My Palestine." How about that? Welcome to Community Church. Maybe by the time the program is over, we will have the foundation movement. There's lots of reasons they might not be here. Parking, family. Iraq has 3 beautiful children. And anyway, we recognize that they should be here, but instead, I'm just going to wing it and sing you a little song that I'm feeling very strongly this weekend. You're not supposed to say "born again" until after Easter, right? But this song is called "Born Again." Words by Woody Guthrie, music by Greg Artzner of the duo Magpie, who are some of our regular people here. I just sing this out of joy. I've had an amazing weekend that I'll tell you a little more about, and I'm singing it a cappella. It'll eventually be on a new record that's coming out, and it's called "Born Again." Thank you, Woody Guthrie and Greg Artzner. This morning I am born again. Light fills the sky. I do not want a heaven in some deathly distant land. No longer desire a pearly gates, nor walk some streets of gold. I do not want a mansion, for my heart is never cold. My heart is never cold. This morning I am born again. I am whole, new, complete. I am overcome all my sins. I stand on my own 2 feet. I am life unlimited. My body is the sky. I am at home in the universe, where yonder planets fly, where yonder planets fly. This morning I am born again. My past is dead and gone. This great eternal morning, my great eternal dawn, I'd give my life, my heart, my soul, to lend some friend a hand. This morning I am born again. I am in the promised land. I am in the promised land. This morning I am born again. No, it's just I got a chance to get out of town this weekend. Friday, played a gig in Lebanon, New Hampshire. If some of you don't know, I used to be a pretty serious traveling performer and musician, touring guy before family and mortgage got in the way, and I started painting the town with a much thinner brush. But Lebanon, New Hampshire is where I had this just lovely gig with this other duo, wonderful couple called Rough and Tumble. They were on the stage, and right here between them was the hugest mastiff dog that you've ever seen, lying there, sort of providing wonderful comfort and juju to their act, and they were very good, and I had a wonderful time. On the way home, I got to visit in Henniker, New Hampshire, with some friends that I was deeply involved with in the early 90s. The Henniker San Ramon Sister City Project. San Ramon is a village in Nicaragua, and I led several delegations of people from Henniker. We also brought a teenage girl to Henniker to receive a surgery and this was in 1995. Anyway, I was with them, and I mentioned that because I had breakfast yesterday with my friend Merrick Bennett, a beautiful cartoonist. He wrote a book, a compilation with several others that are like interviews with immigrant farm workers in Vermont who came from Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and he wrote this book. It's called The Most Costly Journey, and it's sort of, what do you call it, graphic novel, and it's a beautiful book, and it's also translated into Spanish, El Viaje Más Caro, and you should take a look. They're both here. I especially brought it for my colleague Crystal, who's a wonderful artist. If you've never seen Crystal's graphic design on our newsletter and all of our graphic work here, you need to check that out, and also all of our emails and internet stuff, as well as her quilts and her drawing. And she has expressed interest in going back to what she studied in college, which is drawing. And so this is an inspiration for her. Another inspiration is my good friend Pierre Gustafson, who wrote this book that I want to show her. It's called Prompts for My Muse, and it's again just drawing, which Crystal is good at. I'll show you one example of her drawing. Is way over there in the corner. The poster that says "Say Their Names, Black Lives Matter," and two really beautiful colored drawings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. So that's a start. I'm going to take you through a few more books. We have just this incredible wealth of books here at Community Church. If I invite you to come anytime we have office hours, especially on Wednesday, open house at noon, to see what we've got for books. Some of them will be in our permanent library, and there's also a lot of other ones that somehow permanent library. There's a whole library case full of cookbooks. These are all like, should cookbooks be at community? Yes, maybe we'll put them in the kitchen. How about that? When we have a new kitchen, it's all a mess right now, but maybe that's where they belong. And there's a ton of books about everything you can imagine. We also have a couple other books I want to tell you about. Curtis Chin, Ed, one of our board members, Ed Passanese, and I went to hear Curtis Chin give a book talk at the Athenaeum. It was sponsored by our tenant upstairs. It's called the History Project. They're a magnificent organization whose challenge is to archive, celebrate, and preserve Boston's LGBT history. And I really love having them in this building, and hoping that some archiving juju rubs off on us, because our archives are on the 5th floor, and they're kind of a mess, but it's a real treasure up there. The other book I wanted to tell you about was Eva Mosley, who's speaking here in a couple of weeks. It's called Skirting History, Holocaust Refugee to Dissenting Citizen. Eva will be with us second Sunday in March. I'm really enjoying this book very much. Certain book that we'll talk about today. It's called The Wounded World, W.E.B. Du Bois and the First World War. Chad Williams is our speaker this morning, and this is, I wish I could have had more time to really dig into this, but I've just started it. Crystal read it through, and we're really enjoying it. It's just a really wonderfully written book. It's not just a dry, boring historical book about Du Bois. It's a really artfully and wonderfully written. So I'm looking forward to hearing from Chad today. We have let's see. Do we need to do a little tech first, or no? Right up to the microphones? Ah, what a treat. Welcome back. I'd like to introduce you all, if you haven't heard them before, the Foundation movement. One of them is E-Rock and one of them is op. And maybe we can hook up some background for you pretty quickly, but if you just want to take over the thing and me shut up.
I got one for you. I'm gonna ask. I have one for you. You're gonna have to join us for one.
Okay, I've been known to do that.
Dean gets it in.
Once or twice.
1, 2. I'm sure. Like, I think we can just be loud people too.
Well, we have a live stream.
1, 2. Got you. So there's more reason to consider that. Hi everyone. Good morning.
Grand Rising. Check 1, 2.
Yeah, it's been. I don't know. I think from conversations with folks, from putting myself in the world, and from actually isolating as well, and being on phone calls and stuff. A lot of people are. Where is this thing right here?
Higher or lower?
No, it's perfectly placed. I'm just trying to make it not go down. Boom, boom. Word, perfect. Perfect. There it is. Good morning. Good morning again. So, I don't know. I'm feeling really good this morning because the sun is shining and we had some really good Afrobeat music going on in the car. We were moving and grooving, and I was with my nephew Sawazi and Taina was in the car, and I woke up earlier than I needed to. Spent time with the altar. Like, I was having kind of an exceptional morning, which I can't say I always have. So, like, I don't want to misrepresent. But right now, my nervous system feels good and I'm super aligned. And in that, I'm reflecting on the amount of people who are dealing with sorrow, suffering, pain, and how we continue to kind of have the willingness to try. You know what I mean? I was telling Op this morning, like, I've been on, like, not trying ideation. Kind of being like, damn, like, the cycles, like, the pain, the devastation, all the stuff that we keep getting hit. And I got in the mail recently some letters from someone we've actually shared this space with before, who is now a movement ancestor, Chuck Turner. I got a stack of letters from his time at Hazleton in Virginia in prison. And I finally read through them all, and my goodness, there was so much optimism in them. And I was like, oh, I think that's a little bit of fuel for willingness to try. And so with that, I'm actually going to start today. When we go, I'm going to spit a verse that I wrote 20 years ago. We've been performing here for over 2 decades, which is wild, just to be in this space and think about the people that we've shared space with, those who are now, in different forms, energy, memory, etc. And I just wanted to bring the energy of Chuck Turner in the room today. And think about, presente. And think about those who came before us, who understood that hope came from a willingness to try, to keep trying, not from necessarily this eternal optimism, which is awesome. I wrote with Optimus. My man is named Optimus. And sometimes that doesn't mean he's eternally optimist, but he brings sunshine in the room often. And so for me, thinking about, like, it doesn't have to be tied to optimism all the time. It's just the willingness to not give up. And so today we together, not giving up as a collective. Sound good? I'm looking forward to hearing what you got. One of the things I was telling Op is, like, 'cause we were coming and, we're a little older. We got families, children. My bed was comfy. And I said to Op, like, I always look forward to the speakers and presentation. Like, we're going to learn something today. I said, I guarantee you I'm going to learn something I didn't know before I walked in the building. So I'm looking forward to that. And so hopefully we'll add to the energy of that, moving the juices and all of that. Sounds good? Big Op, anything before we just start rapping at folks? Let's rap at folks.
And if I need to say something, I will.
All right, cool. You want to intro the long shots hook, and then we can just go verse for verse?
All right.
It's what it like to be rappers in your 40s. What's up? We did it. We made it.
So I know some of you are thinking that we are here to perform, but we are actually here to perform with all of you. So if you're open to that, if we can use y'all, and you can use us as long as we don't misuse.
Hey, Chuck Turner, my G. I called Chuck one time for a job reference, and I said, mind if I use you for this job reference? And Chuck was like, you can use me, E-Rock, just don't misuse me. I'm here to be useful. And I was like, oh, new shit. Go ahead. Useful, be useful, purposeful.
This is for the long shot. This is for the
Long shot.
This is for the
Long shot.
never supposed to
Be on top. The long shot.
So they stop to brutalize us. We the
Long shot.
gotta stop a system corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now we're making a fuss.
For the long shot.
Never supposed to be on top.
The long shot.
So they plot to brutalize us. Now we the
Long shot.
gotta stop a system corrupt. We've been silent for too long.
Now we're making a fuss.
All right, I know this is the first time we rehearsing this, but I think we can get it a little more in sync. What y'all think?
I think so.
Let's do it. All right.
I think
all right.
so.
So anytime I go like this will be the visual cue. We say,
1, 2, 3.
all right. Cool. Let's
This
try
is
one more
for the
Yeah. Never supposed to be on top.
the what?
So they plot to brutalize us. Now we the gotta stop a system corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now they're making a fuss. Never supposed to be on top.
Come on, the long shot. So they plot to brutalize us.
Now we the
long shots.
gotta stop a system corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now we're making a fuss.
All right, let's go.
Y'all
See-
learn quick.
Let's get it. All right, you ready?
Ready.
This is for the long shots, never supposed to be on top. The long shots, so they plot to brutalize us. Now we the
Long shot.
gotta stop the system's corrupt. We've been silent for too long, and now we making a fuss. This for the
Long shot.
never supposed to be on top. The long,
Long
shot,
shot.
so they plot to brutalize us. Now we the
Long shot.
gotta stop the system's corrupt. We've been silent for too long, and now we're making a fuss. I'm hypocrisy, searching for an answer. I'm the opposition to all of this nationalist propaganda. I'm the reason for the COINTELPRO slander. I'm the Young Lords, the Mau Mau's, and the Black Panthers. I'm necessary to combat the evil. I came as violence, yet the outcome will be peaceful. I am your equal. I came as Che, Malcolm X, and Albizu. I am the people. I'm women's rights, black, Latinos, Asians, whites. I'm a burner. I'm Chuck and Nat Turner. I'm the heaven in this hell. I'm a king like Mel. I'm the light at the end of the tunnel. Sometimes written off as just trouble. I am the foundation. I'm an entire nation. I'm persistence, resistance, the reason for existence. I'm patience. I'm confrontation. I'm independence. I'm the ancestors and their descendants. They can't stop us from breathing because I am freedom. This is for the long shots, never supposed to be on top. The long shots, so they plot to brutalize us. Now we the long shots,
Gotta stop the system's corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now we're making a fuss.
This for the long shots, never supposed to be on top. The long shots,
So they plot to brutalize us. Now we the
long shots,
gotta stop the system's corrupt. We've been
silent for too long and now we're making a fuss.
I'm like Huey, Bobby Seale, and Lil Bobby Hutton. Self-determination strapped on the streets of Boston. Law book in my hand, I swear to tell the whole truth. My city under siege by politicians and police troops. Nowhere to move, got me searching for alternate routes. Lock me up, call me Assad, I'm fleeing to Cuba. Politic with Nahanda strategized maneuvers. Independent thinking, spirit of Patrice Lumumba.
Woo.
You can murder me, can't murder revolution. Fred Hampton, optimist, true rebel musician. Voice of the voiceless, I want the world to listen. Solitary can't confine this mind I was given. Rest in peace, Howard Zinn, your life is a blessing. People been ignored, policies need addressing. And I'm a patriot, state and government dissension. Cause we riders and we fighters if I didn't mention. Long shot,
Never supposed to be on top. The long shots, so they plot to brutalize us. Now we the long shots, gotta stop the system's corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now we're making a fuss.
Never supposed to be on top. So they plot to brutalize us. Gotta stop the system corrupt. We've been silent for too long and now we're making a fuss. Thank you.
We're gonna be back up.
All right. Foundation movement. Iraq and up. Foundation movement, thank you for being with us and providing such joy and anger at the same time. It's a beautiful mix that we all need. Hey, I want to real quick run through upcoming wonderful events. Next Sunday, Kate Poussant Scarborough is talking about yoga and personal collective change. I mentioned Eva Mosley the week after that, March 10th, Skirting History, Holocaust Refugee to Dissenting Citizen. Eva is a wonderful Cambridge peace activist, longtime mass peace action, and also connects music with activism, organizes a whole classical music series that's to benefit and mass peace action and to bring attention to the issues of world peace. March 17th, a very special repeat offender in our space. His name is Mazen Kumsia. He joins us from Bethlehem, and his title is A Bedouin in Cyberspace, a Villager at Home. And he's the founder of the Palestine Museum of Natural History, and he's a wonderful researcher. He's been here in person a couple of times, and the last time he was here, he was supposed to be here in person, but I think for either, I forget if it was COVID or visa reasons, he couldn't join us for the 7 p.m. event we were doing, but he still wanted to join us, so he joined us live. It just happened to be 3 in the morning in Bethlehem, and he and his wife Jessie wanted to do it and be with us. The week after that, March 24th, is Professor Gerald Horn. The Genocide of Gaza, U.S. Foreign Policies and Domestic U.S. Politics. March 31st, a good friend of this church is named Audrey Schulman from the group HEAT, H-E-E-T. They do remarkable environmental work, not only in the city of Boston, but they've done this experiment that's turned into a massive nationwide and hopefully worldwide movement of turning the gas utilities into underground geothermal utilities, like a street that's got 30 houses. You can put one geothermal line right down the middle of the street, and it can power all of those houses after the initial cost for the cost of running a refrigerator, not only heat but air conditioning. She's really an inspiring voice in our environmental climate catastrophe and climate hope movement. Audrey Schulman, that's March 31st. I'll also tell you about our concerts coming up. March 29th is David Rovick's longtime wandering activist troubadour, sings at prisons, sings at all kinds of rallies all the way back to the Seattle World Forum and everywhere in between. Every time he's anywhere near, we drop everything to hear David Rovick's. Into April 6th, we have a Joni Mitchell night, which is going to be organized by Berklee College of Music students and alumni, and a few friends, musician friends from who sing here as well. That's a benefit for Doctors Without Borders Gaza Relief. Deeper into, there's also every second Saturday of each month, we have a peña. Peña is a Latin American style open mic where you can bring a song, you can bring a poem, you can bring anything you want and get on your soapbox and state your case and let your voice be heard. And while you're here, enjoy wonderful food and beverage. The peña happens every second Saturday of the month. Join us. They're always really beautiful events. A lot to tell you about. And then I get to welcome Chad Williams, just a remarkable scholar from Brandeis University. You send out feelers for speakers, and you say to yourself, this scholar or this voice will never come here. And you know what? Sometimes they say yes. Oh, that makes you so happy. When that happens, and that's what happened this morning. Chad Williams is, I'll find his thing somewhere. There he is. Samuel L. and Augusta Spector, Professor of History and African American Studies at Brandeis University. the author of award-winning book Torchbearers of Democracy, African American Soldiers in the World War I Era, and co-editor of Charleston Syllabus, Readings on Race, Racism, and Racial Violence. His writings and op-eds have appeared on the Atlantic, in the Atlantic, Washington Post, Time, and The Conversation. His most recent book, The Wounded World, W.E.B. Du Bois and the First World War, was published in 2023 to rave reviews. And maybe I thought we could start, or should we do this at the end, Amar? What do you think? A little clip from when Du Bois spoke here. Shall we do it at the end? Let's do it after the talk, before foundation comes up. Du Bois spoke here maybe half a dozen times over the course of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. 1959, just by coincidence and serendipity, we had a reel-to-reel tape of two of them, actually. One of his talk, and the other one of a Q&A with him. They're both available on our YouTube channel. On the subject of YouTube, I apologize if you won't even be seeing this, but if you went on YouTube and tried to see us there, we're not there. Reason? We hosted Dr. Helen Caldicott this past Monday, nuclear weapons opponent, physician, senior member of our movement. She joined us from Australia. She was introduced by Martin Sheen, and it was a magnificent event, except that we showed a film that she made in the late 90s, and that film was copyrighted, and we got slapped on the wrist by a certain YouTube whose algorithm said you can't do that, and we're going to spank you, and the punishment was we couldn't live stream or upload for 1 week. So we will live stream next week, and we will upload as soon as we have this program done with. No, we have to wait a couple more days. Anyway, that's why we're not on YouTube today. But anyway, we really welcome Chad this morning. We're just so glad to have you here. Thank you, Chad Williams.
Am I unmuted as well? Oh, sure.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we get the AV working. All right, there's the PowerPoint. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. All right, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Dean, for the warm introduction. Thank you, everyone, for making the time to join us this morning in person as well as online. I'm loving the energy in this room, in this space right now. It's truly an honor to be talking with you this morning in such a inspiring space, inspiring atmosphere, considering the rich history, legacy of the Community Church of Boston. It's truly a privilege, especially considering the speakers who have been associated with this institution, from Martin Luther King Jr. to Thurgood Marshall, Rosa Parks, Angela Davis, and of course the one and only W.E.B. Du Bois, as Dean said, who actually celebrated a birthday recently, Du Bois's birthday, February 23rd. So I think if my math is correct, he would have been 124 years old. I went into history, that's why I don't do math, but Du Bois' a remarkable legacy, and that's what I want to talk about this morning. But we might be well within our right to ask what can be said about W.E.B. Du Bois, the greatest black scholar activist in American history, that has not been said already. We know that he lived an incredible life, 95 years. He was born in Great Barrington, Massachusetts in 1868, died in Accra, Ghana in 1963, literally the day before the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, 95 years. And he was the first African American to receive a PhD from Harvard University that he wrote an astonishing 22 single-authored books. 22 books, right, across a range of disciplines, many of them considered classics today. Hopefully you have read The Souls of Black Folk, published in 1903. If you haven't, make sure after this event is over, you get your copy. He was one of the founders of the modern civil rights movement. He offered his thoughts on nearly every issue facing black people in the United States and throughout the African diaspora, that he's been the focus of literally a mountain of books, right? So what else could we possibly learn about W.B. Du Bois that hasn't been put out there already? This is certainly what I was thinking way back in October of 2000, when I just started research on my dissertation on African-American soldiers in World War I, which would become my first book, Torchbearers of Democracy. I was visiting the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where the majority of Du Bois's papers are archived. And I had, in advance, gone through the finding aid, and I saw this curious reference to Du Bois' World War I materials, right? Literally didn't know what it was, had no idea, but I was certainly very intrigued. So I go to the library, ask the librarian, the reference librarian, can I see this Du Bois World War I materials, right? My expectations certainly weren't high. The archivist returns with 6 microfilm reels. Okay, I don't know if you're familiar with microfilm. These tapes of materials, right? You have to load them into this kind of old funky machine. So I load the first reel, advance it, and very surprisingly, this is what I saw. Now, what was I looking at? As I dug into these materials further, I realized that I was looking at the table of contents of an 800-page manuscript by W.E. Du Bois on the black experience in World War I that he never finished and that remained unpublished. An unfinished and unpublished manuscript by Du Bois on the black experience in World War I. In addition to this manuscript, all of Du Bois's research materials and all of his correspondence related to this project, this book, which had this remarkably evocative title, The Black Man and the Wounded World. The Black Man and the Wounded World. So imagine, I'm a graduate student, right? And I just literally stumble upon an unfinished and unpublished manuscript by the great W.E.B. Du Bois. I was shocked, thrilled, overwhelmed, and in all honesty, very confused. I had so many questions. What was this book? Why did I not know anything about it? Why did Du Bois write it? How long did he work on it? Why was it ultimately unfinished and not published? And why was this book even important? So the story surrounding this forgotten book is truly remarkable. It's a story about the challenges of being African American. It's a story about race and democracy, about history and memory. It's a story about hope, right? As well as disillusionment, faith and tragedy, determination and failure. It's a story of Du Bois in all of his brilliance and all of his flaws, wrestling with the catastrophe of war, its legacies, and the resulting historical and personal wounds. This is the story that I tell in my book, The Wounded World, W.E.B. Du Bois and the First World War. Now, there's obviously a lot to say about Du Bois, a lot that we could talk about, especially in terms of his background, his very long history. I'm happy to answer any specific questions in the course of our conversation. But my story really begins in 1914, at the start of the First World War, the Great War, as it was being described at the time. Du Bois considered himself a pacifist, at least philosophically. He pinpointed the origins of the war and the competition amongst the European belligerents for imperial control of Africa and its people. However, Du Bois ultimately believed that the best hopes for democracy hinged on victory by the Allies over Germany. So when President Woodrow Wilson addressed Congress on April the 2nd, 1917, and declared war on Germany, Du Bois made the fateful decision to abandon his pacifist principles and support the United States entering the conflict. He argued that it presented an opportunity for African Americans to stake claim to their citizenship and bring meaning to Wilson's claim that the world must be made safe for democracy. Black people had fought in the past, and now they would do so again, Du Bois believed, with hopes that the two warring ideals of being black and being American that Du Bois famously articulated in the souls of black folk would at last be reconciled. So Du Bois threw himself into the war effort, encouraging African Americans as soldiers as well as civilians to demonstrate their loyalty on and off of the battlefield. But white supremacy severely tested his patriotism. Along with other African Americans, he had to reckon with moments like the horrific East St. Louis pogrom, July of 1917, which left hundreds of black people dead. But Du Bois's biggest test came when he published Close Ranks in the July 1918 issue of The Crisis. The Great War represented the crisis of the world, Du Bois began. He argued that however distant the war seemed, black people had, in his words, no ordinary interest in the outcome. For this reason, African Americans had to make their allegiances clear. Let us, while this war lasts, forget our special grievances. Forget our special grievances and close our ranks shoulder to shoulder with our own white fellow citizens and the allied nations that are fighting for democracy. We make no ordinary sacrifice, Du Bois wrote, but we make it gladly and willingly with our eyes lifted to the hills. And I'm more than happy to talk about some of the behind the scenes things that were happening as Du Bois was writing this editorial. But the most important point to emphasize is the reaction that African Americans across the country had to Du Bois writing this incredibly controversial piece. Close Ranks unleashed a firestorm of controversy. The Boston civil rights activist and one-time ally of Du Bois co-founded the Niagara movement with Du Bois, William Monroe Trotter, labeled his former friend, among many insults, a rank quitter of the fight for rights. Called Du Bois a rank quitter of the fight for rights. From coast to coast, many African Americans branded Du Bois as self-serving, at best and at worst, a traitor to the race. For a man who had committed his life to the cause of freedom and justice for black people, no charge could be more stinging. The uproar and damage to his radical credentials left Du Bois deeply wounded. So as the war neared, this is the end of the war neared, Du Bois, his credibility tattered, his leadership in question, sat in arguably the most precarious position of his otherwise illustrious career. Then, quite unexpectedly, an opportunity presented itself. At the October 1918 Board of Directors meeting, the NAACP proposed that Du Bois spearhead production of a book on the history of the black experience in the war. He leapt at the opportunity. The scholar in Du Bois was intrigued, but more importantly, here was a chance for redemption. He began work on the book and ultimately set his sights on France, where, as he would later write, the destinies of mankind center. On December the 1st, 1918, Du Bois departed from Hoboken, New Jersey, as part of the official press delegation accompanying President Woodrow Wilson to the peace conference at Versailles. Du Bois would spend 3 incredible months in France. He organized a landmark Pan-African Congress in February of 1919. His principal mission, as he described it, however, was to conduct research for the NAACP war history. He toured the battlefields, seeing with his own eyes the incomprehensible devastation of the war. He literally stood in the trenches. Most importantly, he talked with black soldiers and officers who made up approximately 380,000 of the U.S. Army's total number of troops in the war. With military intelligence following his every move, Du Bois absorbed tale after tale of institutionalized racism, discrimination, slander, and abuse inflicted upon black servicemen during their time in France. Never in my life have I heard such an astounding series of stories Du Bois wrote from France in a January 1919 letter to his NAACP colleagues. He knew what needed to be done. I can say solemnly and without hesitation, he wrote, the greatest and most pressing and most important work for the NAACP is the collection, writing, and publication of the history of the Negro troops in France. Du Bois returned to the United States, enraged, embarrassed, and determined. He channeled his frustrations along with the anguish of African-American servicemen he encountered in France into the post-war issues of the crisis, and especially the May 1919 issue where, in the editorial Returning Soldiers, he declared, we return from fighting, we return fighting. History would be Du Bois's central battlefront in the struggle over the meaning of the war and redeeming the legacy of black contribution to the Allied victory. He encouraged readers of the crisis, and black soldiers in particular, to, in Du Bois's words, help in the compilation of his book. Letters, diaries, photographs, official military documents, and personal memoirs quickly flooded Du Bois's office. Du Bois promised that his book, which he tentatively titled The Negro in the Revolution of the 20th Century, would appear by the fall of 1919. But Du Bois's faith in the revolutionary potential of the war was severely tested throughout the summer of 1919. From Washington, D.C., to Chicago, to Phillips County, Arkansas, race riots and full-scale massacres exploded throughout the country. The number of lynchings skyrocketed, which included many black veterans, some still in their uniforms. James Weldon Johnson, famous civil rights activist, artist, and close friend of Du Bois, labeled these bloody months the Red Summer of 1919. The horror of the summer stunned Du Bois. As he wrote in his book Darkwater, which he completed amidst the tumult and disillusionment of 1919, how great a failure, and a failure in what does the World War betoken? Remarkable question for Du Bois to ask in 1920, just a year after the war had finished. How great a failure, and a failure in what does the World War betoken? Du Bois set out to answer this question. He committed himself to writing. He devoted significant time throughout much of 1920 and into 1922, staying up sometimes late into the night. He usually went to bed at 10 p.m. He even stayed up past his usual bedtime, drafting several potential chapters for what he confidently believed would be the definitive history of the black experience in the war. Du Bois's early chapter drafts reflected an attempt to try and find redemptive value in the global catastrophe and his own place in it. But his disillusionment with the war continued to deepen. The worsening conditions facing African Americans and other peoples of African descent throughout the diaspora caused him to further struggle with the war's individual and collective meaning. And then there was also personal tragedy. On January the 8th, 1922, Du Bois lost his closest black friend and the man who best embodied the quest to reconcile race and country, Colonel Charles Young. Young was the highest-ranking black officer in the Army and Black America's military hero. He was like Colin Powell before there was Colin Powell. Right? He had been unjustly retired from active service during the war for dubious health reasons, really to prevent him from becoming a general. It literally broke his heart. The Army very conveniently reinstated Young after the armistice and assigned him to Liberia in Africa. While on a mission in Nigeria, he became gravely ill and died in a British hospital in Lagos. Over a year after his death, Young's body was finally returned to the United States and buried with full honors in Arlington National Cemetery. But Du Bois could not forgive the government, his government, for what Du Bois characterized in his words the inexcusable crime of denying his friend the opportunity to serve in France, yet sending him to Africa to die. Such ugly reminders of the war's legacy further validated Du Bois's new title for his book, The Black Man and the Wounded World. As the title reflected, Du Bois's initial hopes of the war as a potentially revolutionary moment in the reconstruction of global race relations had evolved to an interpretation of the conflict as one of the darkest moments in modern world history. The war was a global tragedy that, along with laying the seeds for future wars, strengthened white supremacy and furthered the economic exploitation of peoples of African descent. No surprise, then, that he described the war in the opening chapter of his book manuscript as a scourge, an evil, a retrogression to barbarism, a waste, a wholesale murder. Du Bois's public announcement in 1924 of The Black Man and the Wounded World sparked renewed public interest in his book. Encouraged, he began writing again. By 1926, he had drafted the bulk of his envisioned chapters for the book, and it finally seemed on the verge of completion. But Du Bois's guilt about his decision to support the war continued to gnaw at him. In a 1930 letter to the editor of the magazine The World Tomorrow, Du Bois very surprisingly admitted that he was ashamed of my own lack of foresight, and that, quote, instead of a war to end war or a war to save democracy, we found ourselves during and after the war descending to the meanest and most sordid of selfish actions, and we find ourselves today nearer moral bankruptcy than we were in 1914. By the mid-1930s, Du Bois's politics had moved further to the left, and he began to envision his book, began to envision The Black Man and the Wounded World as an explicit lesson about the horrors of modern warfare. Italy's 1935 invasion of Ethiopia added even more urgency to his book, as he saw the same racist, unchecked thirst for empire that led to the First World War laying the groundwork for an even greater disaster in the near future. And, interesting fact, on January the 12th, 1936, Du Bois delivered an address at the Community Church of Boston titled, "The Italo-Ethiopian Situation, Its Relation to the Black People in Africa." A trip around the world later that year, in 1936, brought even greater clarity to the book's new significance. Du Bois would spend 7 months abroad in 1936. First, he visited Germany, seeing up close Hitler and the Third Reich, interestingly enough, during the 1936 Summer Olympics. He then traveled through the Soviet Union, visited Manchukuo, spent time in China, and finally spent several days in Imperial Japan. He returned to the United States in December of 1936, having seen firsthand the seeds of the next World War. As Du Bois saw it, time was running out. The need for his book could not have been more urgent. He wanted people to see that the still open wounds from the last World War promised an even greater disaster in the future. With a sense of desperation, he applied for funding support, but as had largely been the case with all of his other earlier requests, he was rejected. The global nightmares Du Bois predicted soon came true. In July of 1937, Japan and China went to war. Hitler's ambition, aggression, and flagrant disregard of the international order built out of the First World War increased, culminating in the September 1st, 1939 invasion of Poland. By 1940, just as Hitler prepared for the German army to invade France, Du Bois, disillusioned, disheartened, with the Second World War a tragic reality, abandoned hope that he would finish and publish his book. Despite an investment of more than 20 years, despite a manuscript over 800 pages in length, The Black Man and the Wounded World, Du Bois's epic history of the black experience in the First World War, would never see the light of day. So, you may be asking, why didn't Du Bois finish his book? Why didn't he finish The Black Man and the Wounded World? As I argue in my book, Du Bois suffered from what we could think of as a type of intellectual shell shock when it came to writing about and rationalizing a war defined by its irrationality. In his semi-autobiographical 1940 book, Dusk of Dawn, he wrote, "In my effort to reconstruct in memory my thought and the fight of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People during the World War, I have difficulty in thinking clearly." Du Bois, difficulty in thinking clearly? That doesn't sound right. Even up to the final years of his life, Du Bois still sought to understand why he had supported the war in the first place. I felt for a moment, as the war progressed, that I could be without reservation a patriotic American. Du Bois, by this time in his 80s, wrote in an autobiography that was posthumously published in 1968. I'm not sure that I was right, but certainly my intentions were. I did not believe in war, but I thought that in a fight with America against militarism and for democracy, we would be fighting for the emancipation of the Negro race. With the armistice came disillusion. That disillusion stayed with Du Bois until his death on August 27, 1963 in Accra, Ghana. The war consumed Du Bois. It confounded him. He could not make sense of it, both on a personal and on a historical level. He was unable to muster the intellectual fortitude, the intellectual clarity, and dare I even say the moral strength necessary to complete his book. His failure embodied the tragedy and failure of the war he struggled to write about. In this sense, The Black Man and the Wounded World was Du Bois himself. So why does this story matter? It matters because Du Bois matters. He remains arguably the greatest black intellectual this country has ever produced. And, as I talk about in my book, right, it's important that we reckon with him, that we try and understand him anew by acknowledging the importance of World War I in his life and his work. Moreover, just as we rightly celebrate his genius, we must also understand his humanity. Someone who hoped, someone who dreamed, someone capable of even making the wrong decision, and someone even capable of failure. But also someone who changed. The failure of World War I and ultimately the failure to complete The Black Man and the Wounded World were essential to Du Bois's political evolution, his radicalism, and perhaps most importantly, his commitment to peace. By the late 1940s, he became a staunch peace activist, and in the eyes of the federal government, in the midst of the Cold War Red Scare, a distinct threat. This was the title of a speech Du Bois delivered at the Community Church of Boston on November 11th, 1951. The timing of this speech is remarkable because that same month, Du Bois was indicted and tried on charges of being an agent of a foreign principal for his peace activities. He ultimately won an acquittal, but the ordeal and subsequent seizure of his passport by the government were a painful reminder that for a black person criticizing America and fighting for peace came with tremendous risk and cost. In his book titled In Battle for Peace, oops, I tried to go the wrong way, published in 1952, Du Bois wrote, as then a citizen of the world, as well as a citizen of the United States, I claim the right to know and think and tell the truth as I see it. Du Bois said, I believe in socialism as well as democracy. Above all else, he wrote, I hate war. In trying to write and complete his book, Du Bois asked and confronted a profound question. What did it mean to live in a wounded world? A world wounded by racism, by empire, by economic greed, by reckless nationalism, a world wounded by war. This was not simply a historical question. In Du Bois's mind, the future of the world itself hinged on providing the answers. And it is a question that still haunts us today. What does it mean to live in a wounded world? Looking at and taking seriously Du Bois's long, complicated relationship to the history and legacy of the First World War certainly matters to how we understand Du Bois, his life, his work, his evolution. It certainly matters to how we understand the war itself and how it shaped the 20th century world. But it also matters to how we understand our 21st century world and our own obligations as historians, as citizens, as human beings. Du Bois knew that his work did not exist in a vacuum and that it had to speak to the pressing issues facing people of African descent and all oppressed peoples throughout the globe. More than a century after the First World War, many of the same struggles Du Bois confronted: systemic racial, social, and economic inequality, fascist authoritarianism, the willful distortion of and attempted erasure of black history, attacks on democracy, war, and preparation for endless war. All of these remain urgent matters today. Though we may not have completed one of his most important books, Du Bois reminds us of the work still left unfinished and our responsibility to use our knowledge and our convictions to help heal our still wounded world. Thank you. Where do you want me?
Some music and then a Q&A.
Okay, fine. I'll just sit back. Yeah.
Chad Williams, thank you so much for that beautiful, powerful address. It just speaks to Community Church so powerfully because of our founding in the aftermath of World War I and the incredible disillusionment with war profiteering, with how conscientious objectors and dissenters were treated. Some of our oldest documents are clippings of articles about defense of conscientious objectors. So it's just a really wonderful addition to our knowledge about Du Bois, and which will continue on and on. I want to bring up the foundation movement again, Op in Iraq. Oh, Du Bois audio. Thank you for that reminder, Iraq. We're going to hear Du Bois. He spoke in 1959 at Community Church, and let's listen to an excerpt.
Folk who claim intelligence must know about it, and that knowledge must be based on observation and fact, and not be a matter of emotion or wishful thinking. I have studied socialism in college and by reading and also by travel. I knew the work of the Social Democratic Party in Germany in the last decade of the 19th century. I saw what is now Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia before the Russian Revolution. I saw Western Europe before the First World War and learned of the rise of socialism. Between the world wars, I lived in Germany and visited the Soviet Union, China, and Japan. And last year, I spent 11 months in Britain, Holland, and France, in Czechoslovakia, Germany, and the Soviet Union, and in China. All this study and travel does not give me complete knowledge of these great lands with their wide territory and teeming masses of folk. But this experience does give me the right to say that the West, and particularly the United States, can no longer ignore the world or consider themselves the center of the universe. That Eastern Europe and Asia have forged forward at a tremendous rate, that the Middle East and Africa are awakening, and that what this part of the world, together with the West Indies and South America, are thinking and doing in the present is of interest to you and fatal for the future of this nation. What does a socialist country look and feel like? It is not so different from this. The people are ordinary folk. They are not in chains. They laugh and cry. They work and rest. There are homes and schools. Life goes on there about the same as everywhere. Of course, time and observation reveal differences. The long look would distinguish Moscow from Boston. There is more planning of street and building in Moscow. The people in New York are dressed in later style, but the Muscovites are not in rags. They are satisfied with life and less worried than Bostonians. They rest and play, but with less noise. A stroll in the squares or a walk in the park seems to satisfy the mass of people. One thing they fear, which we do not, and that is war. They know what war is, what it costs in death and destruction, dislocation of life, disease and hurt. This is true not only in the Soviet Union and Poland, but in England and France. The world fears war, except the United States. We laugh and joke about it. Our children play at murder. We have no active peace movement. On the other hand, in socialist countries, certain fears are absent, which never leave the waking hours of Western lands, nor always the hours of sleep. They are four in number: unemployment, old age, sickness, opportunity to rest. Take any man you know, any man you meet, take yourself. We fear unemployment, losing our job, being unable to work. This the socialist citizen does not fear. He may have to change work. He may have to change the place of work. But work at current pay, of this he is always sure. We fear old age, what we will do when we are old. We are desperate to save enough to ensure a decent living when we are too old to earn. Thousands of people walk our streets sick with the fear of age. The citizens of socialist countries need not fear age. Every citizen is certain of support, of food, shelter, and clothes as long as he lives. It may not be of the highest quality or what he would prefer, but he will not freeze nor starve. We are frightened of sickness and accident, an attack of sore disease, being knocked over by a car. Any day, any time, we may be put to bed by such misadventure. We may be covered by insurance, but most people are not. We can seldom afford the best medical care, and we nearly always lose pay and burden our family and friends if sick. In socialist countries, medical care is given great attention. Physicians are being rapidly increased in number and distributed according to need, even if that need is in some lonesome country district or in a far-off province or late at night. Medical care is available for all. Of course, everybody cannot get the best, but none are neglected. All workers need rest, but how many dare take it? Some provision for vacation is made today, but most workers do not get adequate recreation and can hardly afford what they take. In socialist lands, the vacation with pay is part of the work contract. The vacation will not be at a fashionable resort. It may not be what the worker would choose, but it will be rest with medical care, with food and recreation. These four fears which haunt capitalist lands are met full-faced and answered in socialist lands. The systems are not.
We could listen to the whole 35, 40 minutes, but you get the drift. And please go on our YouTube channel and listen to the entire thing. It's sort of our introductory video right at this moment. It could have been spoken here now today. It's just a remarkable address, and it's such an honor that this church has Du Bois, Sacco and Vanzetti, MLK, Thurgood Marshall, other speakers that have graced this same pulpit in our DNA, in our blood. Thank you, and now is the moment to tell you about a collection basket that is out in the back and that is also on our website, where there is a credit card or a PayPal option. We need your help to keep this thing moving, as generous as you might muster. I said last week that we received an enormous response to our call because of our empty space downstairs. It spanned the range of $2.50 all the way to $25,000. Thank you. I won't say your name, but you know who you are. Foundation movement, as they come up, I'm going to tell you that I'm right now transcribing a DVD that we have that includes y'all, and it also includes it's when in 2006 we gave the Sacco and Vanzetti Award to Mumia Abu Jamal, yes. and we have it on a DVD, and I've been transcribing Mumia's remarks, which he sent to us by CD. And y'all were there, and I'll show you a little clip of it after we're done. It was a remarkable moment, only 18 years ago. We ain't any younger. Folks, welcome the Foundation movement, and then we'll have a little Q&A.
It's just a blip, right? It's just a blip. It's a moment in time. 8 billion people, dust in the wind. Beyond serendipitous or the divine coincidence, I can't imagine that Du Bois, whose voice was really beautiful, the cadence and the diction. I wish back then authors were reading their own books, because that would be so amazing to hear him in his voice. And maybe that exists, I don't know. But I don't think so. 88 years ago, you told us today that he was here to talk about Ethiopia and European imperialism and colonization in the continent of Africa. And I can't imagine that he was like, 88 years from now, Chad Williams is going to stand here. And continuing the legacy, and I think that's part of the thing that we lose sometimes in the kind of like individualism of like, thank you for your scholarship, thank you for your work, and in the individualism sometimes of like academia and we lose this sense of like, like you just got passed the baton. How beautiful. And you get to be up here and be like, yo, just for a quick moment in time. I think sometimes like those things happen so fast that we don't actually be like, wow. Like, you know, get in the DeLorean 88 years ago and right here, that cadence, right? Probably a different building structure, but in this community church in Boston, that cadence was delivering that. And so to hear from you things I hadn't heard before, and I love watching and hearing and seeing people kind of deal with, like, who are we if we can't possess the ability to change our mind? Who are we if we don't have, and so that nuance that's often lost in real kind of, like, where do we converge? Where does this thing shift? How are we at one with this? What does it look like to be in community and collective and like fight with the fact that this is reality? Or this kind of like suspension of disbelief for what the collective conscious believes is real versus what we know is war versus like I think that could transition us into this next piece. We've had the blessing, Foundation Movement, this is the longest, healthiest relationship I've ever been in. 23 years. It has taken us to Cuba, where we got to meet Nhanda Abiodun, who I referenced in Asada Shakur. It has taken us to South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Tanzania, Japan, where we walked from Hiroshima to Tokyo. It was a 72-day trip, and we chanted. It was 2008. It's funny because it's like 27-year-old Iraq, like Nam Yoho Denge Kyo with the monks. Real talk, Nipponza Mihonji, the Peace Pagoda monks. And when we would walk 15 miles a day, we would chant. We would perform at different places, anti-nuclear proliferation, and we ended up speaking at the UN, and me and Op brushed up on our Japanese. It was pretty cool. There's good experiences and moments in there. And in that, you know, you were walking for 15 miles a day, and sometimes you're chanting, sometimes you're by yourself, sometimes you're kicking it, talking. And in the moment, I had this kind of download of a song, of a hook, that I was like, oh, this would be for someone else to sing. But it exists, and it exists in my mind, and it came to me as I was watching the diabolical outcome of what imperialism and war and genocide is doing and creating in Palestine, which is a place that myself and Optimist got to go and perform in the refugee camps in 2004, so 20 years ago. And so I'll just kind of like pass that to you, see if you want to reflect on that before we go into this piece.
Yeah, definitely. And so one of the connections I want to make, because you talked about Colonel Charles Young and his quest to become a general, in the first place that he went to in terms of Africa, or he was set to go to, was Liberia. And so my lineage is Liberian. And so Nana Crew and Seaside Gribble in particular, my son right there, his is too. So I just wanted to mention that, put that in the air for a quick moment. So about 20 years ago, myself and Iraq were came to and invited to travel to this place right here. So we actually lived this poster in terms of visiting Palestine. And it was interesting for a couple of reasons if we want to talk about the complexity as a black person that lives in the United States of America, a citizen of the United States as well as the world. One of the interesting things is oftentimes within history or present, where I'll say that black people or darker people are in less than positions than their white counterparts, right? And we're talking about resources, how those things have been extrapolated, and we know that's not by purpose. We had the opportunity to travel to Palestine, and while we were actually in the airport, one of the interesting things happened. And so it was myself, it was Iraq, and our friend Justin, and none of us looked like the prototype of a phenotype of what people would imagine Jewish people look like in terms of today. And literally while we were in line, the three of us were taken out of line, interrogated for about an hour, asked questions like, do you speak Arabic? Do you know any Arabs?
Have you ever met a Muslim person?
Have you ever met a Muslim? Don't you know we are in war right now? Why do you want to go? And if you answer any of those questions incorrectly, we don't have an opportunity to go. Just to kind of give you an idea on the way back, literally was taken outside of the taxi before hitting the airport for another hour interrogation. But one of the things that we had an opportunity to do is while we were there, talk to people who have all sorts of ways in terms of resisting against this oppression. So whether that is, the refuseniks, so folks who were in the military who were like, yeah, this is not working for us and we got to fight back. We have people in terms of nonviolent movements. We have martyrs who are like, by any means necessary, and this is what we deem necessary. And one of the things that we came out with this is we never have a right to tell people how they should resist their own oppression.
I say.
All right? And I remember we had an opportunity to talk to a family of martyrs, right? And one of the words and phrases that they said that still rings true today is, we resist so people know we exist, right? And talking about this Pan-African, or being able to see this idea of, I'll take us into a story and then I'm going to share a piece, right? And you talked about this idea of Du Bois traveling, right? And so going to France, going to Germany, going to Japan, and being able to see that and putting it in a book. We had an opportunity to travel, but instead of a book, we put it in a song. And we'd like to share some of these with you.
Word. Dean, can we get you up here for the cameo? May I call you Chad, brother? I said, all right. I don't know if you've heard Dean sing before. Dean actually can sing and play guitar, and he's okay. Word up. So, this is a piece that I was when we were in Japan and walking in anti-nuclear proliferation and putting the connection to like war and the destruction of and going to the sites of nuclear atomic bombs and hearing and meeting story. I was thinking about like how often they can take us, but they can't murder our souls. So, and that gave me something to hold on to. So I'm gonna ask y'all to sing along when you get it. If you get it, it's pretty simple and forward. And Dean, you'll join me.
I will,
And you'll join me.
as best I can.
Word up. I know that you will. All right. So it goes. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They cannot murder our souls. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They cannot murder our souls. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They cannot murder our souls. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They cannot murder our souls.
Diesel fumes and lit cigarette smokes. Soldiers on patrol checking folks. Sounds raise another decibel. Youth hit tank with small boulder. Israeli soldier return to order with a bullet to his shoulder. Our touchdown came to visit, don't speak Arabic, coming from Damascus, profiled in traffic, taxi lights flashing, warning checkpoint ahead, get your story straight, ID and your permit, never leave home without, every day I'm nervous, brother got shot and locked, living in the circus, high on mountaintop, land plots for settlements, hairy old bulldoze crops for his development, Arabs that lived in the spot, they don't benefit, land grab for no cash up, that is embezzlement, 8,000 countrymen receive sentencing, release all of them, and in occupation, assalamu alaikum.
And we grow and we
We
grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They will not murder our souls. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. Oh no, they will not murder our souls.
While we were in the refugee camp, Dehesha camp in Bethlehem, where we received these kufias, we had an opportunity to perform for a youth group that was there. And we had our lyrics translated in Arabic so they'd be able to understand the content as well. We're smiling like we are now. And in exchange, they shared dabka, which is a cultural traditional dance with us. And the family that we were staying with was excited.
Yeah.
And they were excited because they had a family member that was coming home from prison. And while we arrived, there were about 8,000 Palestinian political prisoners at that time. Every community that we would go to, you would see pictures of sons, fathers, brothers, uncles, nephews, and cousins, not knowing why they were arrested or when they would come home.
Not being charged.
Not being charged.
Babies, children.
And so we were at the home, and we were on this high, you know what I mean, from the DABCA experience and from performing. And when we got there, and when we were there, and as they were preparing, the military came into the Dehesha camp. They were, quote unquote, looking for an individual. And while they were looking for that individual, they blew up the new computer center that community had built, and they blew up a home. And so we're experiencing this in real life, watching it on television. And when we talk about the humanity of people, even though we're being attacked at this moment, one, they wanted to make certain that we were okay, and all their neighbors were okay and had everything it is that they needed as we were learning what was unfolding at this time. This is 20 years ago. Home expensive to the heart, but my son is worth more than this land. Scribed away the pen, express it to a friend. We want peace. Our heads scream, cries, and echoes.
Wouldn't trade or settle for 1,000 shekels.
We want freedom. It's not separate from me. You can't separate me with your weaponry. Stand for those who can't stand. If you can stand with me in Abu Dis, set ablaze, war will fall apparently. Allah. In this way, God is who you praise. Hope the U.S. stop its aid. 30 million a day. One day, children will play from Elat to Jayus. Ba'ain Jaffa Desha, there's no excuse. Form a truce from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Stop the looting and shooting in Bethlehem. Jesus died for your sins if you's a Christian. And Jews and Muslims, cousins in religion, fam.
And we grow and we
grow,
grow,
grow, grow, grow.
We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. They cannot murder our souls. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls.
They will not murder our souls. Can I do that?
Yes.
The Omari Mosque, maybe the oldest worship center in Gaza, dates back to the Roman times. The gods were worshipped there. The Omari Mosque that had images of Judaism, menorah, Star of David, that had crosses, that had the crescent moon as well, according to all the different invasions and influences that had happened there. The Omari Mosque, today in rubble. And we grow and we grow and we grow.
We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls. Oh no, they cannot murder our souls. One more, y'all. And we grow and we grow, 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 grow. We let them know, no, 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 no. They will not murder our souls.
They cannot murder our souls.
Whew. The willingness to try, remember, y'all, because that's what this is designed to do, make you stop wanting to try. Yeah? Look around. We got people here willing to try?
Yes, we do.
That's all it takes.
Yes, we do. Iraq and Up, the foundation movement. Over 20 years of being part of our radical worship. Let's call it that. Yeah. I've got a question to start out with, and it's for Chad. It's Reverend Irene Monroe, who just a few weeks ago gave us a talk here, and it was called Black Love Matters, and it was about Du Bois's romance novel that's called The Dark Prince. And here's the question from Reverend Monroe, who thank you. Sure. Thank you for your presentation. As you stated, what more can we say about Du Bois until your wonderful book? How might have Du Bois' notion of a newer concept of black masculinity played into his position to have black men enter the war? What was his nemesis, Booker T. Washington, on Du Bois's position? Reverend Irene Monroe.
Yeah, that sounds like a new book. Jeez.
A new book.
Yeah, I mean, Du Bois was deeply invested in a particular type of black masculinity. I mean, I think there's been a lot of work that's explored Du Bois from a gendered perspective, specifically how he is very masculinist, even patriarchal, in how he's conceptualizing black leadership, the future of the race, his whole notion of the talented 10th. So this really explains his deep investment in black soldiers and black military service, how he sees black soldiers as being this type of embodiment of heroic black masculinity, and how these men, particularly the officers, are going to be the ones who lead the race into the future. This is why he was so invested in writing their story. When he travels to France and he hears directly from their mouths how they're being slandered on a daily basis, how they're being Jim Crowed, how they're being accused of being rapists and threats to white women, and how they're being accused of being incompetent leaders on the battlefield, Du Bois takes this very personally. He knows some of these men personally as friends, but he also sees them as part of this larger vision of black men leading the race into the future. Now, we could also approach this very critically because he's excising black women from that conversation, and there are a number of black women who are playing vital roles in the war effort, who are creating scholarship of their own. Du Bois largely doesn't give them the credit they deserve. So I think we have to take his masculinity, right, very critically in that regard, but also recognize it as being kind of at the core of why he's so invested in writing the history of black soldiers, why he titled his book The Black Man and the Wounded World. So I think that's the first question. There was another question there also. Oh, Booker T. Washington, right. Booker T. Washington dies in 1915. So by the time the United States enters the war, Du Bois has really ascended to the mountaintop, if you will, right? The pinnacle of black leadership. His most intense rival has kind of faded from the scene. Not to say that the Tuskegee institution, the Tuskegee machine, as it was called, was still not very influential. I write about one of the individuals who was a part of that, Emmett J. Scott, who's wrapped up in this story of Du Bois trying to write the history of the war. But without question, by 1917, again, when the United States enters the war, Du Bois is seen as really the most respected spokesperson for the race, right? And that's why it was so significant when he makes the decision to support the United States, and especially when he writes the Closed Ranks editorial in July of 1918, when he encourages black folks to set aside their special grievances, set aside lynching, Jim Crow, job discrimination, etc., right? Put all that to the side for the time being and support your country, right? He was accused of being Booker T. Washington, and even worse, right, in compromising his beliefs. So the legacy of Booker T. Washington really continued to impact how Du Bois was being seen in this particular moment during the war, and how he tried to redeem himself afterwards.
Amar. We give you the word. Thank you, Amar, for being our Zoomster.
Thanks, Dean. Thanks, Professor Chad Williams, for a really great talk. My question is, what were W.E. Du Bois's views about God? Did he believe in God?
Yeah, Du Bois's views on religion, very complex. He did believe in God. He believed in a higher power, a higher being. He was very spiritual. This comes through in his writings. Even a book like The Souls of Black Folk, right, has this remarkable religious undertones to it. He certainly respected certain key religious figures in African American history, but he was also very critical of organized religion and the black church as an institution, while he recognized its historical significance and its importance in the black community. Du Bois was always someone who was kind of very critical of dogma, if you will, right? So he approached kind of organized religion with a type of distance and critical eye, but also recognized just the importance of spirituality and black Christianity specifically in African American religious and cultural traditions.
When Du Bois sailed to France in 1919 with Wilson, that was at the height of the great influenza. And it's when Wilson actually got the influenza in France and never fully recovered. But my question has to do with the black soldiers. Did Du Bois mention anything in his papers about how the great influenza affected the black soldiers in France, and especially their treatment? Was there a difference in the treatment they received compared to the white soldiers?
Yeah, as you said, this was during the height of the influenza pandemic. Fortunately, Du Bois didn't get sick while he was traveling, but certainly hundreds, if not thousands, of African American soldiers did. In fact, influenza was responsible for the vast majority of deaths in the American Expeditionary Forces in France, even more so than combat deaths. So African American soldiers certainly received a disproportionate brunt of the influenza pandemic, exacerbated by the unequal treatment that they received in terms of medical care. Some of my research uncovered experiments that the American Army and the medical divisions were doing on black soldiers, kind of using them to their cadavers, for various experimental purposes. Du Bois doesn't write about this at length. I mean, he certainly mentions it in different parts of the book that he was trying to write, but doesn't, I think, devote significant time to the direct impact of influenza on black troops. But it's certainly a very important part of the larger history of black participation in the war.
A quick question: is there any trace of that manuscript which you showed us the index for?
Yeah, the whole thing. The whole thing is currently in an archive, special collections at Fisk University. It's a remarkable piece of work. As I said, over 800 pages, and I think if he had finished, would have been the definitive history on the black experience in the war. In addition to the manuscript, all of Du Bois's research materials and correspondence related to this project that he worked on for over 2 decades. It's an incredible archive, and the manuscript itself, even though it's incomplete, some of the chapters are finished and polished, others are very much a work in progress. It's a remarkable glimpse of Du Bois as a historian evolving over time, and kind of seeing him as he's writing, right? This work in progress, and seeing Du Bois how he writes, but also how he thinks.
So would it ever be published, or is that just not kind of scholarly practice, or as like Mozart, unfinished work, and some other guy finishes it, that sort of thing? Well, I'm not making any suggestions, but is that possible or not? And you don't know what his wishes might have been about that,
So I have explored that very question at length. I don't think I would, or anybody else should, try and finish Du Bois's work for him. Quite frankly, I don't know what the final version of this book would have looked like. He was still wrestling with it, by 1940, until he eventually decides to put it to the side. But I do think that it's certainly worth bringing to light. I certainly hope one day that the Du Bois estate will be much more cooperative in communicating and granting people permissions to use Du Bois's work. But until that happens, it's still going to be sitting there in that archive in Fisk.
Well, it's a funny thing. It kind of reminds me of two things. One is when Kenny G tried to splice in his own solo in a Louis Armstrong recording and put it out there, and he got a little bit of flack from the jazz community, believe me. But yeah. But the other example is Arlo Guthrie did that with some of his father's stuff, and it is really nice, and it's just like there's a closer blood connection there. And anyway, who did I see first? Go ahead. Absolutely. Help yourself. Yeah. Susan.
Thank you. It was very enlightening. I was also thinking about the parallels with the American black soldiers and the black Jewish in Israel, and the difference of like a second-class citizens that they represent nowadays. But I also would like to go back to the United States and think about how Du Bois would see, from Obama to George Floyd, how can the wounded man, would you see that? And also, how is his thinking about black women? Because we're entering March, and that is March with International Month for Women. If he had any thoughts about women and in the future.
Yeah, I think just to touch on your first question, first part of your question, Du Bois constantly wrestled with this larger question of the meaning of progress. Right? He devotes a chapter in The Souls of Black Folk, which he published in 1903, titled On the Meaning of Progress. And this is right at the turn of the 20th century, this era, the progressive era, where the United States is kind of leading the way in terms of quote-unquote progress, mostly materially and industrially. So Du Bois is asking, what does progress really mean, right? When you have black people who are suffering, right? Who are the victims of American progress. So I think Du Bois would also approach the early 21st century in a similar way, if he were still with us. Sure, he would acknowledge achievements like the first black president in American history, but he would also be very critical of America, critical of the American empire, regardless of who is at the head of it, and recognizing that many of the same conditions, economic, political, social, that black people and other marginalized people are suffering from, have suffered from in American history, still remain urgent matters. So I think he would probably be persona non grata in a lot of circles because of his radicalism, because of his critiques. And he would certainly recognize the continuation of white supremacist violence, such as what happened with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, so many others, as being really endemic of America and its treatment of black people throughout its history. In terms of Du Bois's relationship and views on black women, he was in many ways a feminist in terms of his politics. He was a firm, very strong early advocate of suffrage for women, defending the honor, respect of black women specifically. Publicly, he was very supportive of the advancement of black women in all spheres of public and intellectual life. That did not necessarily translate into his personal life. He was deeply patriarchal throughout much of his life in terms of his relationship with his first wife, his daughter, other women in his life. I think his relationship with Shirley Graham Du Bois later in his life was very important in terms of approaching the issue of women's equality much more equitably on a personal level. Shirley Graham Du Bois is a remarkable individual and activist in her own right. So Du Bois's views on women are very complex. He was he was very layered in his thinking, as well as in his actions when it came to black women.
Cool. So super curious, and I would definitely have like a lot of questions to throw at you. So I'm gonna throw one at you. My knowledge of Du Bois was solo black folk, and then all the way to like Niagara movement, socialists, like the indictment, veto mark, all of that. So I missed like this. I was like, oh, this is a portion that I'm very much don't know. You mentioned that he was I want to quickly confirm that I heard it right. He was a guest of the president when he went to Europe to be with the war, or that was a part of the government basically supporting his presence there because he had supported the war, right? Yes, kind of. I'm wondering what the fallout, like I'm thinking about like Beyond Vietnam, fallout with Lyndon Johnson stuff from Martin, like what was his fallout with leadership at that point? Was there a particular, like, did they come for him? Like, obviously they did with indictments, but was there like, was he specifically, what's the kind of tea on that? Like when he decided that he was gonna, like, hey, this is evil, this is diabolical, cool. Give us a little bit of that. What was the clapback?
So again, Du Bois writes Close Ranks in 1918. He's got black radicals like William Monroe Trotter calling him a traitor to the race, as well as a number of other black radical leaders. So Du Bois, by the end of the war, is being accused of, essentially being a failed leader, right? You are not representing us by taking this stance. So he views trying to get to France as a way to kind of do damage control by demonstrating his continued leadership and stature on the global stage, right? He does that by organizing this Pan-African Congress, right? But by also trying to get a head start on writing this book. Part of the tea is that Emmett J, I can go into a lot of detail here, right? But the only reason he gets to France is because he's able to get a passport through Emmett J. Scott, who was Booker T. Washington's former secretary at the Tuskegee Institute. Emmett Scott is working as a special assistant in the War Department. At the time, Du Bois, one way or another, gets in close with Emmett Scott and is able to get a passport to France, when other black leaders, other black radical leaders like William Monroe Trotter, like Ida B. Wells, they're being denied passports, okay? So because Du Bois has these kind of inside connections with the federal government and Emmett Scott in particular, he's able to get to France while others aren't. There's a lot of questions in the black press. What is Du Bois doing over there? He's saying that he's representing us, but he's not really representing us, right? So this is in the context, especially when Du Bois returns in 1919, kind of this emergence of a new generation of black radical leaders, the new Negro, as it was called at the time. So, A. Philip Randolph, Marcus Garvey, right? They're viewing Du Bois as an old Negro, right? He has compromised his radicalism. He is no longer representing kind of this new emerging generation of African Americans who have been radicalized as a result of their experience in the war. So as I talk about in the book, part of Du Bois's desire to write this definitive history, right, is to reestablish his radical credentials, right, by becoming kind of the voice, right, the representative of black soldiers, of this new generation of black activists, black leaders, etc., and how he kind of struggles, to do that in many ways. Right. So that's as best as I can succinctly put it. There's a whole bunch of juicy stuff in here.
Get the book. Let's put it up once more. The Wounded World, W.B. Du Bois and the First World War. I have listened to that talk a couple of times, and I'm really trying hard to do what he does, which is say an S and whistle at the same time. It's just impossible unless you have that special gift that I don't have. I've tried really hard and I just can't even approximate it. So, have we any other questions, either online, anybody on the Zoom, or on the, oh yes, Jose. I wanted to also mention that Alan Perez, who is our vice president, gave a wonderful talk last year about what we've been talking about here, scholars or activists reviled, MLK reviled after the Vietnam speech, and he gave us an entire talk, and just wanted to I thought about that when we were talking. Thank you, Alan, and here's Jose Aleman.
Yes. Thank you for your presentation and for the book that will stay even when your voice diminishes. Your book will tell the story. I am a high school teacher, a public high school teacher. I didn't go to school here. So I am at the high school, and this is the Black History Month, and very little is being done, in my view, to emphasize that and to give meaning to it. My question to you, who not only went to school here, but as a scholar are very active in academia, who is W.E.B. Du Bois in the African American community and in public schools? I don't hear. Why?
Well, as I said, Du Bois is probably the most remarkable Black intellectual, scholar, activist in American history. I would argue that he's one of the greatest intellectuals, period, irrespective of race, in American history. He was truly singular. There was no one like him during his lifetime, and he knew it as well. Amongst African Americans, and again, that's a kind of broad generalization, Du Bois is seen as one of the founders of the modern civil rights movement and Black freedom struggle as we know it today, both in the United States as well as throughout the entire African diaspora. His works are foundational, canonical to African American studies, to Black studies, The Souls of Black Folk, one of the most important books ever produced in this country. So Du Bois is, I think, certainly revered and highly respected in Black scholarly circles. But I think part of the reason why he has not had the same type of recognition, appreciation that some other prominent African American figures like a Martin Luther King Jr., for example, is because he was so complex. He did live such a long life, and as I alluded to in my talk, evolved in very significant ways over the course of his lifetime. Du Bois leaves the United States in 1960 and lives out his remaining years in Ghana as a member of the Communist Party. So throughout the 1970s and 80s, Du Bois was really persona non grata, at least in terms of the teaching of American history in public schools and in many universities as well. It was Black scholars, Black historians who were the ones who kept Du Bois's legacy alive by teaching his work in their classes in different organizations such as this, right? So in that regard, it's not surprising that Du Bois is not taught in public schools even today. So that's why I think it's so important for scholars like myself, teachers such as you, to reclaim Du Bois and to really introduce students to him and his life and his work at a young age.
And a little suggestion, while you're probing that question, consult the Zinn Education Project. It's a magnificent resource for teachers of all sorts. I'm on their email radar screen, and it's just amazing every time to get. It's basically kind of alternative curriculum materials from a Zinn perspective. Howard Zinn, who spoke here numerous times during the 80s and 90s. Yeah, who received our own Sacco and Vanzetti Award in 2000. And we have 40 years of cassette tapes up there in our archives, and we're slowly trying to find all the very best ones first and digitize them. And Zinn and Chomsky are among those. The Berrigan brothers, we've already done Cesar Chavez and Rosa Parks, and it's a magnificent, rich thing. And what I'm just so thrilled about is that it is alive, and it is with us, and it informs us every day. What we just heard, Du Bois speaking in 1959, is just as relevant in this moment in time as it was back then. 1940, we're going to have a talk from Charles Gallagher at BC, talking about the Christian nation and Father Coughlin, anti-Semitism in that era, Nazism in the United States. Again, Charles Gallagher, a professor, a scholar, didn't know about that we were still here. And he had, all these references to community church, and I, when I heard about his book that's called The Nazis of Copley Square, I emailed him and said, hey, we're in Copley Square, we're Community Church of Boston. Would you like to come and see our archives? Would you like to come and speak? And he was just so thrilled, and we have him in April to speak, and his response was, I didn't know that you still existed. Talk about a well-kept secret. That's all we got, except one last really important thing. Thank you, Chad Williams. Let's hear it once more for Chad. Thank you. We hope that you will not make yourself scarce and come back soon. It's just great to have you. The last announcement, really important one, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, also known as Larry Wilkerson, will be joining us in person next month. Colonel Wilkerson had a 30-year career in the military, and he was Colin Powell's chief advisor on foreign relations. And he will be here on Friday, March 15th, in person. There will be a reservation page up. I suggest that you get your reservations pretty soon, because that will be a really popular, well-attended, amazing program that we will have. It will also be live streamed. Lawrence Wilkerson, and again I thank Amar Ahmad for bringing that program and other really marvelous programs like Dr. Helen Caldecott, who you will be able to see as soon as we're able to get that that piece of video up on our channel. Thank you, Foundation Movement, for being with us. Always a pleasure. I can hardly wait to show you the video from 2006. And thank you, Chad Williams. Arise, arise, I see the future in your eyes. To a more perfect union we aspire, and lift our voices from the fire. That's from Gene Rowe, a beautiful song that I have recently been singing. Come back and I'll play you the whole thing. And all of you who joined us on Zoom, there were like 35 or so. Thank you for being with us, and spread the word about this program to other folks who can watch it anytime on our channel, YouTube channel. We have lunch. We thank Luis Guzman for always having lunch for us afterwards. Also, just a shout out to our magnificent staff here. Crystal Rollins Jackson for all the beauty that she brings to this place. Thurman Judge, who does our heavy lifting on removing very heavy furnaces, to painting, to doing switching lights in this tall auditorium. Zinli Zhu, who keeps us honest and keeps our finances straight. Thank you all for joining us. Be well, do good work, make progress every day. Love you. Over and out.